The midday sun hangs like a molten coin in a cloudless Kansas sky, scorching every clapboard facade until paint blisters and peels. Dust devils twist through empty alleys, whispering half-remembered secrets of drifters who vanished between sunrise and sundown. Horses stamp and snort at the hitching rail, tasting the dryness in the air the way old gamblers taste danger on their tongues. Down the length of Front Street, swinging doors bang against weather-beaten jambs, and the cracked window of Jonas's store glints with the promise of hard bargains and harder lives. Somewhere beyond the livery, a church bell tolls the hour, slow, resonant, almost mournful, while at the far end of town the railroad track shivers, hinting at distant horizons most locals will never see. Yet Dodge City is more than sun-scorched lumber and restless wind. It is a crucible of survival where the weak learn guile, the strong test their limits, and every face you pass conceals a ledger of joys and sins. For 20 extraordinary years, Gunsmoke invited viewers to stand on this very boardwalk, to feel splinters bite into their boots, while justice and chaos waged daily war for the soul of the frontier. Week after week, America tuned in not merely for shootouts or galloping posses, but for lessons etched in Gunsmoke. That mercy can be stronger than vengeance, that solitude can haunt even the bravest heart, and that a single moral choice can reverberate louder than a rifle crack across the plains. Tonight, we do more than revisit that legendary street. We cross its threshold into the hidden rooms where scripts were set aside and real lives unfolded. We will walk the lanes of memory beside the actors who risked their private hopes and frailties to give Dodge City breath. These were men and women of flesh and contradiction, towering heroes who quaked in their dressing rooms, saloon queens who fed rescued lions before slipping into sequined gowns, stunt riders who shattered bones so a nation could gasp in wonder. Their triumphant entrances and heartbreaking exits form a grand, untamed tapestry that rivals any narrative the show dared to stage. So tighten your cinch, square your shoulders, and step forward. The sun is merciless, the street is unforgiving, and the stories waiting beyond those swinging doors will scorch, surprise, and ultimately illuminate every corner of the human spirit. 6'7" and carved like a cottonwood trunk, James ARNESS was born to play a lawman. Each time he stepped into Marshal Matt Dillon's boots, the world seemed to stop spinning until he gave the signal for it to resume. But the same unyielding resolve that electrified audiences often left ARNESS isolated after the director called cut. Offset, he drank to numb the pressure of embodying a national hero, and the glass in his hand became a wall between him and the people who loved him most. Studio memos described late-night phone calls laced with slurred apologies, production meetings derailed by simmering tension, and last-minute script changes designed to hide trembling hands the next morning. Meanwhile, his children grew up measuring time by his absences. A Christmas missed for a publicity tour, a graduation forgone for a location shoot. In rare letters he wrote from distant hotel rooms, ARNESS confessed that Dodge City sometimes felt more real than Brentwood, more permanent than any embrace. When he died on June 3, 2011, the headlines celebrated a legendary career. Yet the quiet pages of his diary revealed a man who feared that immortality had cost him tenderness. With each sardonic eyebrow lift and gravel-voiced admonition, MILBURN Stone's Doc Adams reminded audiences that healing in the West demanded courage equal to gunfighting. Yet Stone's real vulnerabilities hid behind the swinging saloon doors. The day he signed away his residual rights for a fleeting windfall of $100,000, he joked that a doctor shouldn't count on passive income. But as syndication riches poured into CBS coffers, that joke curdled into nightly torment. Friends recall poker games in which Stone shuffled chips absent-mindedly, calculating lost millions he could never reclaim. 2 marriages crumbled under the twin pressures of regret and chronic illness. After a bypass surgery, he wrote a private essay titled "What a Heart Can Hold," describing love as a ledger perpetually on the verge of overdraft. In retirement, he found solace nursing abandoned colts on a modest ranch. But even there, he was said to pause at sunset, listening for an applause that never came. When a heart attack stopped him in 1980, the world lost a gifted actor. He perhaps finally escaped a math he could no longer bear. Festus Hagen stumbled through Dodge with unpolished grammar and a voice like rusty barbed wire, yet his loyalty glowed like a campfire in a blizzard. Ken Curtis, the man behind that drawl, lived in constant motion. 1 month topping country western charts, the next rescuing stray dogs on Ventura Boulevard, and the next weathering divorce papers delivered with relentless precision. Alcohol was his compass when success left him directionless, and gossip columns chronicled late-night escapades so colorful they read like pulp novellas. Still, there were softer chapters, mentoring a nervous child extra through his first scene, financing a Navajo school's music program, sending anonymous checks to out-of-work stunt writers. Curtis insisted the world comprise equal parts melody and mayhem. He just never learned to mute the mayhem. On April 28, 1991, he drifted into sleep and simply never woke, leaving unopened songbooks on his piano and an unfinished letter addressed only to whoever finds my heart. Miss Kitty Russell could silence a barroom with a flick of her eyes. Amanda Blake could ignite one with the curve of her smile. Behind that allure, she carried the weight of tabloid obsession. Photos of late-night galas stitched her into Hollywood's tapestry of excess, even while she quietly bankrolled wildlife refugees and lobbied Congress against illegal big cat trafficking. Party rumors, cocaine, secret infidelities, fizzled marriages obscured the gentler truth. Blake feared ordinary days more than scandalous nights because ordinary meant facing the emptiness fame left in its wake. Selling her residuals for quick cash bought another year of masked exhilaration, but deprived her of security when hepatitis ravaged her body. On August 16, 1989, she passed away surrounded not by cameras, but by rescued lions whose purrs shook the ICU walls. A final lullaby for the saloon queen who never stopped fighting for creatures with no voice. Chester Good's limp was a stroke of acting genius. Dennis Weaver's uncompromising beliefs were a lightning rod. He installed solar panels before tax credits existed, wrote manifestos on resource depletion, and once postponed filming to testify before the Senate. Actions that made him a hero to environmentalists and a headache to cost-conscious producers. His marriage unraveled under the strain of crusading idealism and relentless media scrutiny. During bitter custody hearings, reporters counted electric car prototypes rusting in his driveway, as though eccentric technology equaled parental deficiency. Yet Weaver's Colorado Earthship, constructed from tires, adobe, and recycled bottles, became a pilgrimage site for eco-pioneers. He walked its arched corridors in the final months of prostate cancer treatment, whispering gratitude to the walls that breathed with him. On February 24, 2006, he slipped away under a vault of desert stars, believing with fierce conviction that the planet would heal if only enough people learned to listen. Before he poured sarsaparilla for thirsty cowpokes, Glenn Strange staggered across sound stages as Frankenstein's monster. Heavy prosthetics taught him patience. Typecasting taught him frustration. Directors saw hulking brute, never quiet philosopher, and the roles dried up when his strength waned. At home, legal notices arrived like autumn leaves, back taxes, unpaid alimony, quarrels over property lines. He trimmed costs by building his own furniture, a hobby he called wooden poetry, yet creditors saw only assets to seize. When lung cancer struck, he refused oxygen on set until the final take. Not out of vanity, but fear of losing his last foothold in show business. He died on September 20th, 1973, and the studio sent a fruit basket, perhaps the cruelest symbol of how quickly Hollywood forgets a face once it stops sweating under stage lights. Nathan Burke brokered cargo with measured calm. Ted Jordan brokered chaos with every outburst. A disagreement over residual percentages escalated into threats of litigation, and before dawn the next day, his name disappeared from 3 pending projects. He spent the next months in courtrooms instead of sound stages, sipping black coffee while lawyers dissected his temper in clauses and subclauses. His Palm Desert estate boasted marble fountains, yet the echoes of family laughter were long gone, children preferring cramped apartments to gilded exile. When Jordan died on March 30th, 2005, no press release followed. Only a caretaker's terse email confirmed the news. He once wrote that a freight ledger never lies. Perhaps that is why his life's final balance remained painfully private. Taylor "Cactus" McPeters swung from saddle to bandstand with effortless bravado. Studio security logs recount fistfights settled under parking lot floodlights, the combatants later sharing cigarettes like comrades. One spring night in 1960, a rumor of an affair with a co-star's wife erupted into a midnight horse race challenge through Griffith Park. Legend says both men rode bareback, whiskey bottles lashed to their belts. Racing toward an argument neither could win, Mack's heart gave out 2 years later on a Cambodian set, far from the open ranges he loved. In his guitar case lay a letter addressed to "My Kids," promising that the next tour would finally be the calm one. It never left the case. To recognize Rudy SOTTER, you must rewind the tape, frame by frame, until you spot a wistful figure leaning on the bar, humming under his breath. Between takes, he composed melodies, simple, aching laments about prairie moons and drafty boarding houses. Producers laughed when he asked to perform one on air. The laughter echoed in every bottle he drained. By 1980, he lived in a rented trailer on the edge of Bakersfield, subsisting on government cheese and memories of jukebox ambitions. He died in 1991, leaving a cardboard box of demo reels no label had ever spun, each one labeled in shaky pen, "Someday." When Bert Rumsey glided through saloon doors in 1955, audiences never suspected he rehearsed those steps to hide a tremor in his right hand. Early warnings of the alcoholism that would later consume him. On-set whispers about impropriety with a teenage extra spread like wildfire, scorching every bridge to larger roles. The girl vanished from the industry, Rumsey vanished from headlines, and silence swallowed the truth. He died alone in 1968. The only attendee at his estate sale was a stranger who collected vintage barware. Dabbs Greer approached every role as if auditioning for humanity's conscience, yet even he could not outrun suspicion during McCarthy's Red Scare. Studios severed ties, phone calls stopped. To survive, he sold encyclopedias door to door under a false name and wrote sermons for preachers who lacked his gift for rhetoric. Years later, he returned to Gunsmoke, but the scars of exile lingered, his laughter a notch too loud at rap parties, as if daring anyone to forget him again. He witnessed 9 decades of American life and wore each year like a medal, some earned, some inflicted. When he passed in 2007, he left instructions. "Tell them I never stopped believing in kindness, even when kindness stepped away." Quint Asper's silent depth foreshadowed the swaggering box office titan Burt Reynolds would become. Stardom surged so fast it blurred, and he spent fortunes trying to prove money meant nothing, buying sports teams, helicopters, entire restaurants just to rename the menu after his friends. Bankruptcy followed like a hangover, and lawsuits lined up behind it. Yet crew members recall Reynolds using his last payday to cover a gaffer's medical bills, scribbling "pay me back" in smiles on the memo line. When his heart surrendered in 2018, it felt like Breedway dimmed half its marquees, and applause withheld for a performer who always sprinted, never walked, to the spotlight. Clem Fuller perfected the dead fall, tumbling from rooftops onto hidden pads with a grace that defied bones. Bill Hart's battered spine still quick-drew revolvers on cue, even when prescription painkillers made the horizon wobble. Pete Kellett broke both legs in a canyon jump and finished the scene before asking for help. Months later, he quietly wired money to the prop master he'd accidentally injured. These men shared no red carpet moments, but every time a hero somersaults across your screen, know a stunt performer once whispered a prayer, clenched his jaw, and hurled his body into gravity's arms, so your pulse would race. Halligan sneered at Dodge's virtuous citizens. Charles Wagenheim trusted real ones too easily. When savings dwindled, he hired a caregiver off a bulletin board. Friends warned him, but loneliness dulls the edges of caution. On March 6, 1979, neighbors heard a crash, then silence. The resulting headlines exposed elder neglect in searing detail, prompting the Screen Actors Guild to establish emergency hotlines. Wagenheim never saw the reforms his fate inspired, but every actor who now receives crisis aid walks in the shadow of his final brutal lesson. Roy Roberts exuded swagger, whether as Banker Bodkin or Hotelier Dobie. Off-screen, his unapologetic conservatism clashed with a younger, more liberal Hollywood, and dinner invitations dwindled. Yet he kept meticulous ledgers documenting every slight, as if itemizing insults could generate interest. Hank Patterson, by contrast, spoke seldom and listened always, filing away the confessions of frantic co-stars. In old age, he penned a novella, The Stableman's Prayer, never published but treasured by grandchildren who marveled that his quiet wisdom had waited so long to unfurl. Both men died with reputations complicated, estates comfortable, and lessons divergent. One about the loneliness of loud opinions, the other about the silence of unsaid dreams. Purple Heart veteran Lou Brown nursed unseen shrapnel in his psyche, each flashback pushing him closer to the bottle. Shug Fisher used humor as armor. Between takes, he'd juggle shot glasses, making crew members forget late paychecks, if only for a moment. Greg Palmer's barrel chest and wolfish grin disguised a boy who once pawned his father's watch to buy acting lessons. Success taught him to buy property. Failure taught him property means little when headlines scream paternity scandal. All three rode the same dusty trail toward redemption, yet died with unfinished business. Apologies never spoken, songs never recorded, promises never kept. George Selk polished Moss Grimmick's stable without fanfare, yet away from camera he threw furniture during creative disputes, demanding respect for the invisible. Woodrow Chambliss, a master of blend-in roles, collected first edition scripts like Holy Writ. He believed background actors carried the world's weight so stars could shine. Unfortunately, his mercurial temper severed alliances faster than he could build them. Their careers prove that even the faintest blurs on film hold galaxies of yearning, if only someone pauses the frame. Howard Culver spent teenage nights tuning a crystal radio set, dreaming of voices that could sail coast to coast without ever cracking. Decades later, meningitis threatened to steal his own, yet he hid the diagnosis, fearing producers would recast him before the next dawn. He carried painkillers in a vest pocket, next to a photo of straight arrow fans crowding a county fair, proof that storytelling could move mountains without bullets or barroom brawls. He died in 1984, halfway around the world, having promised his family one last vacation they could remember with laughter, not tears. Stand-ins are the silent lineage of cinema, and Michelle Breeze reigned as their queen. Elizabeth Taylor once called her "my ghost." While Breeze joked she was more phantom than human, she waged endless war against Hollywood's glass ceiling, filing grievances, mentoring younger extras, insisting that every silhouette on screen deserved medical insurance and hot meals. Success came in strange forms. A modest house filled wall-to-wall with discarded costumes donated by grateful wardrobe departments. A secret savings account that quietly crept into 7 figures. When she died in 2016, she left instruction for the profits to fund acting scholarships for anyone too quiet to be heard. Jim Buck and Floyd the bartender shared Brubaker's weather-beaten face, but few knew he moonlighted as a cemetery investor. He believed Land of the Dead outperformed Wall Street, and he was right. While screen credits stalled, his burial plots multiplied. Ironically, he built a fortune larger than most leading men, yet attended charity galas in threadbare suits, claiming money looks better underground. His 2010 death was noted by bankers and undertakers, but Hollywood barely blinked, proving that sometimes the richest stories live just offstage behind a gate marked private property. Pete Kellett wasn't just a stuntman, he was a crash test poet. He kept a notebook in his dressing room locker, each page labeled with the bone he'd broken and the lesson it taught. After concussion number 7, he wrote, "Lights are bright enough to blind you from tomorrow." Yet he never stopped performing. When injuries forced him into rehab, he forged a makeshift physical therapy regimen for fellow stunt players, complete with pool noodles and prayer circles. He passed in 1982, leaving behind a second family he'd supported in secret, and a notebook that now rests in the Motion Picture Academy archive, a blueprint of resilience etched in scar tissue. Clem Fuller's deadfalls became folklore among location scouts. He could topple 30 feet, land in silence, and stand before dust settled. But repeating miracles bruises more than bones. A doctor once warned one more fall would paralyze him. Fuller replied, "Tell gravity I'm not done talking." Matthew McHugh, perpetually uncredited, filled Dodge's background like wallpaper, yet his journals reveal he took notes on sound mix levels, camera angles, everything, preparing for a directorial debut that studio politics prevented. He died in 1966, scripts still under his pillow. Dusk settles over Dodge like a lavender shroud, softening gunmetal horizons while lantern light flickers in shuttered windows. The last notes of Sam's out-of-tune piano drift through the Long Branch, mingling with the sweetgrass scent of prairie night. One by one, spectral footfalls fade. Marshall Dillon's heavy strides, Festus's lopsided shuffle, Kitty's confident click of heels. Yet listen closely. Beyond the cicada hum and the distant hoot of an owl, you can still catch the after-sound of laughter on a rap party, the muffled sob of an actor alone with regret, the ragged cheer of a stunt crew saluting another day survived. Film cans tarnish, but the emotions they captured refuse to rust. Every time a streaming queue cues the familiar theme or a vintage TV channel schedules a marathon, celluloid phantoms rise anew, offering modern souls a compass built of courage, staunch loyalty, brittle hope, and fiercely contested redemption. Their on-screen legends remind us to stand our ground when conscience calls. Their off-screen scars remind us that valor rarely comes without a toll. And if you let your imagination wander far enough into the twilight, you might glimpse their silhouettes at the edge of the vacant street, tipping hats, tugging vests, turning slowly toward the endless plains as though invited to ride once more into stories that will never truly end. The saga of Gunsmoke is ultimately a mirror held to our own beating hearts, reflecting not only the grandeur of frontier myth, but also the fragile truths we tuck beneath our everyday armor. The cast's journeys teach us that immortality purchased through art offers no shield against loneliness, illness, regret, or folly. Yet their lives likewise testify that a single generous act, a scholarship funded in secret, a stuntman's hospital bill quietly paid, a last whispered blessing over a rescued cougar, can blaze brighter than marquee lights and outlast the most explosive ratings sweep. So the next time your evening feels ordinary, cue an episode and let that dusty main street unspool before you. Hear the echo of hoofbeats overlapping with the actor's real-world pulse. Recognize in their triumphs the glimmer of your own potential, and in their missteps the familiar stumbles shared by all who grapple with fallible flesh. Then carry their blended legacy forward. Walk steadfastly like Dillon, love defiantly like Kitty, sing loudly like Festus, yet temper every stride, every affection, every note with the humble awareness that tomorrow's script remains unwritten. If we honor their memories by living our scenes with honesty and daring, the wind over Dodge will forever hum with more than legend. It will hum with the promise that each new viewer, each new dreamer adds another verse to the greatest Western ever told.